And we are live. It is Wednesday in the middle of a pandemic, and unfortunately, this pandemic does not involve zombies. So I'm a little bit disappointed here because I really, really wanted zombies. Remember, my name is John Crump. I am the director for GOA for the state of Virginia. I'm also a writer at AMLN.com, and I do this little show and a bunch of other Pro 2A things. And tonight I am joined from a city council member who actually helped pass a 2A resolution. My county and Lina County, I guess we're not good enough to have 2A resolution, but some other people do. And I met him through a guy that I know that is the reason why you can have a concealed carry handgun in DC. But that's our common friend. And so let me bring him on. His name is Chris Cornwell. How you doing?
Hey, good evening, John. How you doing, sir?
Not bad.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Second Amendment sanctuary revolutions and what the process of that and how your city council, which is the city council for
Southampton County.
Southampton
County. Well, it's the same thing as the council. We're a board of supervisors, but it's the same thing, just over a county. We're way out here, southeastern Virginia, on the fringes of Hampton Roads in Southampton County.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about how that came about, what made you guys decide to do it, and everything else. So let's just jump into it. First, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Sure, exactly. My name is Chris Cornwell, and I'm a lifelong resident out here in the county. And this is my first term as an elected official, if you will. We took over January 2nd with a mostly new board out here in the county, and we've got many issues that we're working on. This was just one of the smallest ones, honestly. This was an easy fix.
Okay, so you voted for
what's that?
You voted for the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution.
Well, the sanctuary was actually passed just prior to our board coming on in December, as far as the Second Amendment sanctuary. Our previous board did that prior to us coming on board. And what we did is followed that up with our resolution stating it was an answer to Senate Bill 35 and House Bill 421 that's going on in Richmond, or had been going on in Richmond at the time. And it was basically a response to that. Stating that we weren't interested in having any additional Second Amendment restrictions imposed on the residents of our county. And that's kind of the stance we took, and in passing the resolution that we did.
421 basically says, I'm going to pull it up here.
Sure.
It basically, what it does, it gives the county's rights to forbid like carrying firearms in certain buildings, at parks, and things like that. One of the most disturbing things that I found about the bill is they could ban carrying of firearms at a rally or something like that, like lobbying. But it also bans firearms from adjacent streets.
Right.
I think is kind of crazy because, if you're just passing through.
Very broad, right? Yeah, that includes you too, even if you're just passing through. And that's part of the nightmare of this legislation. I think you can think about it, in your geographic area where you're located, as I think about it down here in Hampton Roads, if you will. I don't work in Southampton County, so I have to travel from my home to Suffolk. So I'm in Southampton, I'm going through Isle of Wight, I'm going through Suffolk, and then have the great potential to go through Chesapeake and Portsmouth and Norfolk, and the nightmare of the fact of in specific gun legislation, impossible for me to keep up with as a concealed carry permit holder and a citizen of this community, and traveling back and forth through it. It's going to make me break the law constantly, potentially. And that's one of the reasons we at least wanted to take that stance here in our jurisdiction. I wanted to send a Richmond. We did as a board a message to Richmond to say we're not interested in this, imposing greater infringements on our citizens, as well as I wanted to send a message to the citizens as well to say, hey, we're not interested in infringing on your rights any more than Richmond already has. So it was kind of twofold in doing that. It was multifaceted in trying to, resolve a lot of those things. It's not often a locality, a local government governing body such as ours wants to relinquish additional authority granted to us by the state. That's usually something we don't get the option to do, but in this case, it was something we didn't want. We didn't want to exercise.
Yeah. It looks like our comments are not coming through from the different locations.
Gotcha.
And our counters are broken. So we have a real interaction with the people who watch. I'm not sure if you watched the previous one.
Yes, sir.
Probably gonna I have another monitor that monitors it. So if you're out there and I miss your comment, it's because instead of having it on one screen, I have like 10 screens open over here. So I might miss a comment here or there. But we do have some questions here. Did you have any type of blowback or people not wanting you to pass that resolution in Southampton?
We didn't, and I credit that to a number of things. One, we hit it very early. The legislation hadn't even passed when we passed our resolution saying that we didn't want any parts of it. So there wasn't a whole lot of time for things to fester before we actually passed the resolution and it was on the books. Leading up to it, it was added to the agenda as a late arriving matter. So there wasn't a tremendous amount of time. We didn't have a public hearing. I sent a draft copy of it to our county administrator, who then had our county attorney do the final draft copy of the resolution for us to vote on that night at the meeting. And we brought it up, we discussed it. There was no public comment, and then we passed it unanimously as a board. So that's what I mean when I say that this was one of the easier things that we have actually been faced with in my short tenure as an elected official here. We're fortunate in that regard that we didn't have the blowback here. I think most people were very in favor of it, very in favor of having their Second Amendment rights supported by us. And we're relieved to see a governing body such as us take the progressive, proactive stance in making this happen for them.
Another question is, sure, are you planning on enforcing the resolution, or is it just purely symbolic?
Definitely planning on enforcing. There was some discussion, and I'm not a lawyer. I work in public safety, if you will, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't claim to be. But it's my understanding that there is a difference in the eyes of the law between an ordinance and a resolution.
There is
in enforceability of it. We went with the resolution with the understanding that we will enforce it. That's why we didn't go through the extra trouble of the ordinance with the public hearings and the advertising and expense of that. We didn't feel like it was necessary in our particular case because we all had the intent of fully enforcing our ordinance. So it's more than just symbolic to us.
You guys have a sheriff's department there.
Yes, sir.
The sheriff and the sheriff deputy didn't get their raise this year because of all the Second Amendment sanctuaries. And there is a bill pre-filed for next year that would take away 80% of their pensions if they refuse to pass gun laws. Have you had any feedback from your local sheriff's department of what they are going to do about if they're going to enforce it? Or
I have had brief conversations with our sheriff, Sheriff White, regarding this matter. He's a gun owner, obviously. He has expressed to me his support of our Second Amendment rights. Now, where the rubber meets the road, when they start taking things from them, when they start withholding pensions and salaries, that changes the game. I mean, let's be honest. So in facing those difficult decisions, if that were actually to come to fruition, it would be interesting to see what his stance would be then.
Yeah, it's hard to tell when, before it actually happens.
Right. That's a daggone crying shame. As valuable as our law enforcement is to us, and is important they are to us as a society, and as hard as they work and putting their lives on the line for us every single day for as little money as they make in the first place, and to have our state step in and say they're going to withhold any of it is a tragedy. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that was really shocking was the Democrats were very open about why they were doing it. And not only
They
did
didn't even try to hide it.
no, they doubled down on it.
Yeah.
And then they introduced this revolution. I don't think the revolution will pass because I think there'll be a lot of outcry.
Mm-hmm.
But just to pre-file something like that is crazy, especially when 96% of the state is a Second Amendment sanctuary.
Right. They blatantly ignore that fact. They ignored all of us that were there on lobby day, and they ignored the fact that, I mean, it's just, those are phenomenal numbers if you think about it. The number of sanctuary counties and localities, cities and towns there are in the Commonwealth. I mean,
there's 140.
Right. That just, it speaks volumes.
Yeah. Do you think the election in Virginia was bought by Bloomberg? Like I do?
Yes, I do. I personally do. That's my personal opinion. I think he had a whole lot to do with it. I think his money had a whole lot to do with it. And unfortunately, a lot of us, conservative gun owners didn't show up to vote. And I think that hurt us, and continues to hurt us now. I think they have kicked a sleeping giant, if you will. I think we're awake now. I think the vast majority of us are awake now. Unfortunately, it's too late. That damage is done. They're doing it in Richmond now. Hopefully it'll be something that we'll be able to undo when it comes time to vote in the next election, when we head to the polls. It's unfortunate that money can buy you those things, that money plays such a big part of these elections and their outcome, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. It's incredibly unfortunate. What made you decide to run?
Good question. I've had lots of people.
It was not mine.
Yeah, I've had lots of people ask me that, and of course, the gun control wasn't on the forefront when I decided to run the early part of last year. I'm busy. I'm a captain in a local fire department here in Hampton Roads, and I'm married to a nurse. I'm high school sweethearts. We've been together for 25 years, and we've got 3 boys all in the public school system. Let's see, 8, 12, and 14 years old, in soccer and Boy Scouts and piano and guitar and all kinds of extracurricular activities. So we're very busy. We've got a lot going on, but it was important to me. Again, I said I was born and raised here in Southampton County. It's important to me to give back to the community that raised me. It's important for me to set the example for my 3 boys that it's only going to be as good as what you make it. And if you're not willing to give back to it, then you can't expect it to take care of you. And we needed representation at the top in our county. There wasn't, our voices weren't being heard by our local government. We as the citizens didn't feel like our voices across the board in our local government were being heard. And that was a big part of the push by my local community and in my jurisdiction, if you will, to have me seek the seat in the first place, was so that I could be the voice of the people that elected me to represent them within our county government. So that was a big part of my motivation behind it. When I was first approached, I told the community, the people in the community of whom I grew up with and have great respect for, y'all are crazy. There's no way I can do that. Everything I got going on, what do I have to offer? And the more they kept calling and pushing, the more I thought about it, and nothing ventured, nothing gained. I said, well, if it's meant to be, it'll work out. And so I filed the paperwork, launched the campaign, did my thing, won by a landslide, to be quite honest. And I aim to give the people what it is they elected me to this position to do, and that's to listen to their concerns and bring them forth and make good positive change as best I can.
That's really cool. So you're not trying to be a career politician or anything like that.
No, sir. I have told many that I'm not a politician. Really, I'm just a regular old Joe. Honestly, I didn't even see myself here. Honestly, this is not something I aspired to do my whole entire youth and early adulthood. I'm not even 40 years old. But politics is not something I saw myself getting into. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy being the voice for people that may not otherwise be heard. I enjoy those aspects of it, and I look forward to continue doing that for folks as long as I can.
Yeah, I gotta look into that. Sheila, whose comments are coming through.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, not. I guess I don't know what's going on. Like none. Whatever. It happens sometimes. She wants to know: are you familiar with that bill where there was a bill saying that if people published inflammatory things towards politicians, that they could be guilty of a crime?
That is correct. Yes, I am somewhat familiar with that.
Did that pass?
I believe it did. Yes, sir. I think it makes it a class 1 misdemeanor to get on Facebook and defame or criticize or publicly. It has to be pointed. Like, John, I'm coming after you for the remarks you made. So I'm kind of threatening you in a way, is my understanding of the bill anyway. But if you post something like that on Facebook or send an email or make a phone call saying the same thing about certain elected officials, then they will charge you with the crime, is my understanding of it. To me, it's an infringement again. Let's talk about the Constitution, the freedom of speech, if you will. He's making some very unpopular decisions, and people have a right in a non-threatening manner to voice their concerns and express their opinions about what it is he's doing that they don't agree with. And they shouldn't be charged with the crime for doing so. Again, unfortunate, but I do believe it did pass.
Yeah, didn't Biden just threaten to slap someone?
He did, totally. That union worker.
Yes,
with profane language and all.
Yeah, that's a threat of violence.
Yep, he sure did. They're not showing that in the mainstream media, though, are they?
No. When he told them. Did you see that, by the way? Yeah. I'm not taking with your guns. It's like yelling a fire in a movie theater. You can't have your AR-14.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what he said.
Well, as long as you have my AR-15, then you can have my AR-14.
14, right. Yeah, you can keep it, Biden. Hey, he's got a 20-gauge shotgun, though. I think he told him that, too.
You have a 20-gauge shotgun or a double-gauge shotgun is another thing you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't believe it. This whole state has just changed. Have you lived here long?
I have lived here my whole entire life. Even went to school. I've been in Southampton County. I've lived here my whole life, except for when I was away in college in the western part of the state. But I have lived in the Commonwealth my whole entire life. So this is the craziest time that I can recall, coming from Richmond and the laws that they're passing down, forcing down our throats. And I mean, I think they're really changing the landscape of Virginia for many years to come, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just want to say that there is a new firefighter coming on who's going through fire school right now.
Okay.
In your area. His name is Aaron Proctor. He watches the show, so make sure you get him fired.
Very good. Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Yeah, so make sure you get him fired.
All right, good.
Yeah, so you are a firefighter, and I used to be a firefighter back in the day. It's probably changed a lot since I was like it was late 90s.
It probably hadn't changed as much as you think. There's been some safety measures that have been put in place, and things are taken more seriously now than they were then. But it still burns hot, and we still put water on it to make it go out. So as far as that goes, things are still the same. Yeah,
laws of thermodynamics aren't going to change that much.
Right. Since the beginning of time, since Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah. So laws of thermodynamics. When you ran for city council, what was the reaction? Or not city council, I keep on saying.
That's okay.
County board. What was the reaction around the firehouse?
Um, to be quite honest, it's something they're not used to. Really, this is not something that firefighters do. You know, this is what the lawyers do, and the retired people do, and people that don't have careers and families and all this other responsibility, not fire captains. Um, I think it's been mostly positive for the most part. They embrace it every time they can. Of course, the jokes come along with it in the firehouse. I've been called everything from governor to chancellor to your honorable to you name it. Um, but
Nice.
at the end of the day, I think they respect the position and the responsibility that I've taken on. A lot of the guys I work with do live out here in my county. Some of them in my district of the county. Um, so we're just we border Suffolk where I do work, so we're not that far away. Um, so in a lot of the councils I serve on throughout Hampton Roads, our Suffolk City Council are a part of as well. So it's been widely positive with the guys I work with. They know I'm busy, so they respect that.
Yeah, I can only imagine how it is being a firefighter, like a full-time firefighter, and then also being on a county board. It's
But
crazy.
as soon as we approved we did our organizational meeting back in January 2nd. And as soon as we approved the calendar, we changed the meeting night and we kind of had a schedule for the whole entire calendar year. I was able to take that calendar and lay my shift work, ABC shift calendar on top of it, and then lay my church calendar on top of that, my kids' school calendar and extracurricular activity on top of that, and then plug everything in and make it work, so that I could be everywhere I needed to be as frequently as I needed to be there. It took a little bit of time at the onset at the beginning of the year, but it really played out pretty good as I laid out the calendar for the year, so that there's not too much overlap. You can't be in one place at the time, and when you've got all these things demanding of your time and attention, you know you have to be a good steward of your own time and budgeting it and managing it appropriately so that you can be everywhere you need to be. But it hadn't been too bad.
Gun ownership in Southampton. Would you say it's a big gun area, or is it like my area where like guns are looked at as evil?
Yeah, I would definitely say it is a big gun area, if you will. Of course, our population isn't but around 18,000 people in a 600 square mile county, so we're not densely populated by any stretch of the imagination. But we are a very rural community. Um, we're Hunting is very popular, deer hunting, and it is very much a part of who we are out here in rural America. Um, if you will. Again, as we're talking about the legislature, the one that says, my 14-year-old son can't come home and get a gun and go sit in a tree stand without my direct supervision, or if I'm working a shift and my son is at home and has access to my shotgun and somebody breaks into the house and he's defending himself and our property and his little brothers, and defends himself appropriately, then I'm going to be charged with a crime, because I allowed him to have access as a 14-year-old to responsibly handle a firearm in my absence. So that was just another one that really affects us, those of us that are in rural America, where kids, even teenagers, are taught the responsible handling of firearms and grow up with them and around them, as a way of life and as a recreational thing where they go out hunting with their dads and granddads and things of that nature.
It's not only in like rural areas. I think in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, there was a kid that used a AK-47 to defend his house.
Right.
I think it was in Vegas. I would like to say it's in Vegas, but I can't remember exactly where it was.
There was another one, and some of the viewers may remember better than myself, but I believe it was in Texas last year, where it was a teenage female. Actually, she was upstairs and was met by intruders at the top of the steps. They had broken into the house, and she was home alone. So she caught the first one with a shotgun round to the chest. as it turns out, she's a marksman. She trains very heavily in skeet, so she knows what she's doing with a shotgun, and she knows how to shoot it. She knows how to handle it. She knows how to be responsible with it. So she had that training and background. She had access to the weapon in the home, so that when it was broken and entered into, she was able to defend herself and her home. And she shot both of them and defended herself. And who only knows what would have happened had she not had that option or had that ability or that training or that skill to defend herself.
Yeah, someone just sent me the article on that. I haven't even heard about this. Right here. Oh, no, it's a single. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there you go. 14-year-old.
Yep, that's it. That's it. Had my son done it in Virginia with this new legislation, they'd have charged me with a crime.
You Brandon Williams out there, yeah.
Yeah.
My viewers are pretty quick with the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy that they would charge you with a crime. I spend a lot of time in New York, and one of the things is up there is they don't understand guns.
Right.
You know, I'm not talking about upstate New York. I'm talking about like New York.
Right.
They don't understand guns. They don't understand why anyone would need a gun. Yet, their crime rate's through the roof.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what happened? I'll call the police. Do you think the police is going to be there in time?
Most definitely not. Not even in New York. There's just not time. The church shooting most recently, it was over with in how many seconds? And the whole thing was resolved by a responsible citizen with a gun. Had they had to wait on law enforcement to get there to mitigate the hazard in that church setting, who knows how many people would have met their tragic end right there in that sanctuary. That's the problem. As great as law enforcement is, they can't be everywhere all the time. I've said it before that, you know, all this gun legislation, we all agree we got a problem with mass shootings. It's not a gun problem. I think most of your viewers probably agree with that. But the problem is that none of this legislation fixes anything. It doesn't do anything to resolve the issues that are there. I am my own first line of defense. I'm my own first responder. When it comes to protecting myself and family, that's my responsibility first, not the government's, not the sheriff's department, nobody's but mine. And the best way for me to handle that is with my firearm. It levels the playing field. It makes things fair.
Well, the Supreme Court even says that the police have no duty to defend you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they can't be everywhere at once. They never will be. They'll never be able to get to where they need to be as fast as they need to be there. There's no way.
Bloomberg, when the guy who stopped Jack, I can't remember what his last name is, Jack something, when he stopped the church shooting down there, Bloomberg actually made a comment on that when he was asked about it. I'm not sure if you heard it, but he said only the police should have the ability to decide whether to shoot or not.
Yeah, that's pretty ignorant in my mind. I don't know how you can watch what happened there and make a statement like that. It doesn't even make sense. To me, what happened there in that sanctuary negates this whole entire argument. And to even look at that and say that in light of it, the only people that should have guns and decide whether or not to shoot are your law enforcement, it's mind-boggling to me that people think that that's okay.
Yeah, well, Bloomberg also thinks that any gun that holds over 3 rounds should be banned. So,
right, and you know as well as I do that the magazine capacity doesn't have any effect really on how many people they end up killing if they decide to start killing.
Now, do you think that these politicians actually believe what they're saying, or do you think that they are saying it just to pander?
I think it's probably a combination of both, depending on the politician. I think some of them have probably heard it and said it so much that they actually do start to believe it. They actually do believe it is true. They're convinced in their own minds that by restricting magazine capacity, they're going to cut down on the number of mass shooters and the number of people that are killed when people do go bonkers and decide to start shooting people. Whereas at the end of the day, it's not going to have any effect. It's not going to fix anything. We have a mental health problem here in our country, and until you start addressing those issues, we're going to continue to have the same problems we've been having. Gun control, it's not a, there's been a lot of blowback recently on the license plate that they passed legislation on. And let me get this verbiage right. What does the license plate say? Stop gun violence, I believe, is what you can now order a license plate to say. And the argument has been made that what kind of message is that sending? Stop gun violence. Well, the guns aren't violent. It's the people whose hands they're in that are inflicting the violence that make them violent. So how about a license plate that simply reads stop violence, stop meaningless violence? Because there's lots of other ways that you can inflict harm on somebody other than just a firearm. Yeah. But the lawmakers and the politicians have seemed to latch onto it as a platform.
Yeah, I deplore violence, but I'm also strictly pro 2A. You ever listen to Joe Rogan Experience?
I haven't, sir.
He you know Joe Rogan is? He have a podcast. It's wildly entertaining. It's
right.
They have people from all over different like political spectrum from one side to the other. He has scientists on and actors and comedians. Right. Whoever. Right. Actually, he's had a couple of my guests on that I've had on this show. So that's kind of cool that we shared some guests. But one of the things he likes to say is we have a mental health problem that, what did he say? We have a mental health problem that is getting confused as a gun problem.
Right.
Yeah, right. I agree with him on that.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what we have is a mental health problem. As I mentioned earlier, my wife's a registered nurse, and she's been saying it for years. She saw it in the ER. People come in with psych issues, and they don't have nowhere to put them. They don't know where to send them. There's no beds available. That's a donut hole in our medical system. Right. And in our legal system, too. These people fall through the cracks.
And do you know why that is?
What's that?
Do you know why that is?
I don't. Money. I think it costs a lot of money to fix the problem. I think that it is here's really what I think as well. That is a much more difficult problem to wrap your head around and to fix than just saying, oh, we're going to ban guns. That's why I think the politicians latch on to guns, because it's measurable. People can see it. So it's easier for them to articulate and try to justify taking the guns to fix the problem, because it's more measurable and easier to fix than the real problem, it being mental health.
Well, I did a thesis on it. And what I come to find out, and there's tons of data. This is not even it's not even like a shocking thing or anything like that. It's not a guess. It's actually what it is.
Right.
Back in the late 70s, there was a book written. In the early 70s, a book written, and they made a movie about it called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was about a long-term mental health facility, and there's a lot of abuse going on. That movie caused such an uproar that people went to their state legislatures to shut down long-term mental health facilities because of what was in the movie. They thought all long-term mental health facilities were like that.
Wow.
And all these laws got passed because of banning these things and shutting them down because of that movie directly.
The movie, right.
And what happened was it created a big hole because they needed those facilities. But because of a movie, and I'm not blaming the movie.
It was right, but simply because of it, they shut them down.
Yeah, it's like people saw it in the movie and they translated that into, oh, that's the way it must really be.
We can't have that. So they shut them down.
And it shut them down. And that brings me to my next point. It's so easy to convince people of something, even if it's totally not true, by just stating it.
That's true. Our media does it a lot.
Yeah, it's the power of the media. How do we fight back against that? I know that's $1 million question, and it's not an easy answer. And I'm asking you that because I don't know the answer.
No, I think that is a great, honest question. And the problem being is that your voice is a lot bigger than mine because you have this podcast and you're broadcasting it on 10 different medias. And so lots of people can see it. So you can have a positive influence on those people in that regard.
Yeah, but
mine is a little bit bigger than some people's because of my political position. You know, I feel like when I talk, people listen to what I have to say. So I feel like I can have a good positive influence on my little circle of people. The problem is that both our circles are quite small in the grand scheme of things. We're not the national news media, so we can't get out there and give subjective information or just give information and let people form their own opinions about it, or give factual information to vast majorities of our nation's people, because we don't have the outlet to do so. And I think that's kind of what we're combating. That's what we're up against. And that's what makes it so hard for us to get a good, honest message out there, because we're not the mainstream media that does what we all know they do. It's unfortunate. I don't know exactly how to fix that one.
And it seems like we're working with a much smaller budget.
Most definitely. And they've got the money to spend, and they're going to do it to get their agenda across. And that's what they do over and over and over again. And whatever, and people buy it hook, line, and sinker. It blows my mind that just because the media says it, people don't think for themselves independently and come up with their own opinions, whether I agree with them or not. I always encourage people to listen to the facts, find out what they're listening to is actual info. Don't depend on somebody else to tell you what their opinion is and force their opinion on you and think for you. Listen to the information, form your own opinion, whether I agree with it or not. I still respect you for having one. And people just don't do that. I don't know whether it requires too much effort or people too busy to think about the information that's before them to come up with an opinion of their own, or whether it's just simply easier to go with the mainstream media and simply agree with it.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. And I think with big tech controlling a lot of the strings, they can shut out a lot of opinions that they don't want out there.
Right. They definitely filter what they do and don't want disseminated to the people. It's unfortunate.
Although there is a hostile takeover of Twitter going on.
Oh, this is good news. And I think that's something too that the media is not used to. I think, Trump uses social media to his advantage, and it really ticks off the mainstream media because they don't have any control over it. And I think social media is something that we can attempt to play to our advantage because we have access to it, and it's free for the most part, and it does enable us to reach a whole lot more people than we could without the internet, via phone or email. So as much as we can take advantage of it, as you mentioned with the Twitter revolution, I think it's great.
No, there's actually a guy who is trying to do a hostile takeover of Twitter.
In a good way?
Yeah.
You said hostile. That doesn't sound good.
Well, they don't want to let it go.
Really?
Yeah. Paul Singer.
Okay.
He is
big tech making big moves to rein in political advertising. Twitter's ban.
I was about to bring it up.
Okay.
But he bought a major stake in Twitter. I'll bring it up here. But Paul Singer, he is a billionaire.
Right.
He
is a billionaire.
A Republican billionaire, a pro-gun Republican billionaire. So,
I CEO amid GOP concerns of bias.
Yep. Yeah. So basically, what he wants to do, he wants to buy Twitter because he says, "Hey, they're they're biased, and I'm gonna buy them and fire Jack Dorsey
to keep him from being biased.
Yeah. So that's
interesting.
Brian Wren, who I think you know.
Yeah, who's that guy? Big shout out to Brian for getting us together. Thank you again, buddy.
Yeah, look up Wren versus DC if you guys get bored out there. But that's who that is. I still use Parler or Gab. I use Gab. I try to use Gab, but there's just so many social medias out there that it gets kind of crazy, and it gets kind of lost in the noise, you know.
Right.
I try to use like Minds. Minds is a very libertarian, Facebooky type thing. But it's just so hard,
right,
to manage all these social media accounts. Getting back to the 2A stuff and Southampton, up in Northern Virginia, where I am, we've seen a big change where a bunch of anti-gun liberals from the north come down, and then they start taking over things. In Southampton, have you guys seen anything like that? It's probably going to come.
We haven't yet, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to our population. Our growth numbers have been flat and continue to remain flat and are projected to be flat. So we don't have an influx of outsiders, if you will. We got a lot of been heres and don't have a lot of come heres in Southampton County. We have some military population that commute to the rest of Hampton Roads. But for the most part, we don't have the population density and the influx of new people coming in here trying to force their ways on us for the most part. We're fortunate in that regard, I feel like. We don't have the infiltration of those that aren't like-minded for the most part to us. Of course, everybody has got there's always the potential for a difference of opinion, but there's not the majority anyway coming in here trying to infuse their opinions on the rest of us.
Unfortunately, that's exactly what we have here.
Right. We're blessed in that's not the case here. Hopefully it'll be a long time before that'll happen with our populations. We don't have anything bringing thousands of people in here. And that's the only thing I could foresee making a drastic change in what you're describing is a problem for you guys is bringing in new people from the city out here to the country and trying to impose their city way of life on those folks out here that have made a life in rural America.
Yeah, 70% of the people in Loudoun, where I live at, are from a northern state.
Really?
And that's kind of crazy that they left the northern state because of high taxes or no job or whatnot. They come here because of our low taxes or freedom and everything. And then they try to change it into where they left.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. And in changing it, they're no doubt going to raise the taxes to something more similar to where they just came from. And that's another reason people like living out here. It's a simpler way of life. Things are a whole lot slower. There's no traffic jams unless there's animals or livestock or wildlife in the road. We have pretty reasonable tax rates, but we carry our own trash to the dump and we provide our own water, most of us via well systems. We don't have street drainage, all these things that people in the city become accustomed to. We're perfectly comfortable with that. And that's why we choose to live out here the way we do. The hospitals are further away. Fire and EMS is further away when we have an emergency. Law enforcement is further away if we have a need to call on them. But these are all calculated risks that we take and deciding and choosing to live out here on the fringes of society, if you will. It take you 20, 30 minutes to get anywhere, to do anything, to buy gas or to shop or go to the doctor or any of those things.
Yeah, I would love to live somewhere like that, but my wife from Long Island, right outside the city. So
right, it's great. It really is.
She was not going to do that. Yeah, when I was born, the first house I lived in was in Fairfax City. But it wasn't Fairfax City back then. It was actually, we had a farm.
Right.
Where Fairfax City is now.
Wow.
So that just shows you how much it's changed in the 44 years that I've been alive.
I see a tremendous amount of change. You know, I work in Suffolk, and I'm specifically assigned to the Harborview area of the Suffolk, North Suffolk right now. It's really a totally separate seeming city from the rest of the city, if you will, because the growth is just phenomenal. The tax base up there funds the entire rest of the city, it seems at times, because they're building. The roads can't keep up with it. The infrastructure can't keep up with the amount of stuff they're building. We're getting in a 5-story Amazon distribution warehouse just announced on 80 acres in our district, up there. And it's just the truck traffic that comes along with it, and the growth and the money that is spent up there. It's just amazing. And I say all that, getting back to what we were talking about, is that it all used to be a farm. It all used to be rural, much like the rest of Suffolk. And throughout the course of my career there up until this point, the last 20 years, it's just exploded into this massive growth that I had never seen anything like before, really.
Yeah,
a lot of those fields and farmland, you know, it's buildings and parking lots and office complexes, hospitals, things of that nature.
Yeah, there was a place in New Jersey that I read about that used to be all farmland. And then Amazon built this huge distribution center up there. And what the people didn't realize is that they have 30,000 shipments going out of there a day.
Wow.
So there was constant truck traffic. Now there's like going through the town there's always a traffic jam no matter what time.
Constantly, yeah. Right. And that's something we see a lot of too with the Port of Virginia, you know, as big as it is, and the truck traffic and coming in off the ships, and it's a lot. It really is. The interstate structure of Hampton Roads is a challenge in and of itself, just because of the population density and the traffic and the port and everything else.
Yeah, it is insane. It's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
But yeah, it's really funny. I have relatives that have come down, and they saw someone open carry, and like, oh my God, the guy got the gun. I'm like,
yeah, it's pretty commonplace down here. You know, a lot of people carry concealed, and that's the point. You don't know that it's concealed. You never even see it, but it's nothing. Just yesterday, I was in the grocery store, and there was a gentleman in there had a sidearm on him. It's a whole lot more common to see out here than it does other parts of the city. And you know, I think in the city we're a whole lot more comfortable with it. I think in the city people become uncomfortable with it, just because they're not used to seeing it. They're not used to being around it.
Yeah, getting back to being in Southampton and stuff like that, do you think Richmond is aware of your guys' needs and your concerns?
Completely not.
Okay, you don't think they're aware, or do you
completely not at all? I think they're in their bubble up there in Richmond for the most part. I mean, we've got some representation up there from out here in the country, but it's very limited. And I think they get into their little bubble up there and completely lose touch with what it means to be in rural America, what it means to be out in places like Southampton County. And we're a whole lot more populated and a whole lot more city-like than some other areas of our Commonwealth that are really out there, that are really contrary. And I totally think that Richmond has lost sight of what it is we do need and what it is we don't need. You know, with the government intrusion, we don't need them in every aspect of our life like they might think that they need to be. I think that's something they may have lost touch with, is they pass all this legislation and force all these things down the throats of those of us living here.
For a longest time, the people in Richmond, the Democrats in Richmond, have been pushing this idea of a constitutional amendment to fight back against gerrymandering,
right,
and prevent gerrymandering, and have an independent, nonpartisan committee draw up the borders.
Right.
Now it seems like, it's not. It seems like now they've backed off that, and they do not want that amendment anymore.
Right. Why do you think they backed off?
Because they have the power now.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I think it's interesting when they're in control, and yet you give them the control to control what those districts are going to be, and hence the outcome of future elections accordingly. I think that's a lot of power that could be misused in putting future elections together.
Yeah, I think they do misuse it. I think both sides misuse it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really on board with independent committee and stuff like that. But they dropped
it
that.
seems to be a fair way to do it to me. That way there's no bias. You know, you can ensure that it's districted in a fair manner that's not going to be swayed towards one side or the other, so that you have an outcome that's as fair as possible, regardless of which way it goes.
Okay, let's get back to the gun stuff since we are a gun channel.
Sure.
Where do you see the gun laws in Virginia going next year?
Oh, next year, as soon as we flip Richmond and it becomes a Republican legislature, I see a lot of this stuff getting overturned. Hopefully.
Well, I'm talking about next. There's no elections.
Right. How do we move forward with what they've imposed on us?
Yeah. Well, do you think they're going to try to impose anything else on us in the 2021?
Probably.
I think the assault firearms ban. I think that's going to come back.
It's going to come back. What didn't get pushed through this year, I foresee coming back next year. They can't. They bit off a tremendous amount to chew this year, across the board, with the number of bills that were introduced and the number once they ended up here and the number once they passed to go to the governor's office for signature. He's going to need multiple pens to get all these things signed. He's going to be running out of ink. It's just tremendous what they tried to accomplish in 1 year. I mean, it's a lot to stomach. So the few that didn't get passed, I'm surprised as many got through as what they did, honestly. On one hand, but then the other hand, being completely democratically controlled, I'm not surprised. But I foresee them reintroducing a lot of those that didn't pass this time and try to get them pushed through next time. I really do.
Yeah, one of the things that I found very interesting is there is a delegate. Her name is Tran, and she's a big abortion rights thing. And we don't really talk about abortion on this channel.
Sure.
One of the things she said is abortion was ruled constitutional, so any restrictions on abortion is therefore anti-constitutional.
Interesting.
And yet she voted for all these gun laws, and she voted for the HB 961.
Yeah, interesting. Seems contradictory, doesn't it?
It's like, come on.
And, I said early on, and I still believe now that a lot of this gun stuff, they introduced this stuff initially because they knew that it was going to create the outroar that it did. They knew we were going to be ticked and that it was going to wake us up and that we were going to be at lobby day by the thousands. And I really feel like a lot of it was a distraction. They knew they were going to back off of it. It's kind of like, I'm law enforcement certified, and that's what my degree is in and everything. And it's kind of like in an investigation, when we're getting ready to charge somebody with something criminally, we charge them with everything that we possibly can, in the hopes that when we get to the Commonwealth attorney and go to court with it, that something sticks. That's where you negotiate. We're going to toss this charge and toss this charge. And hopefully the one that we wanted to stick in the first place is the one that actually ends up sticking and that we get them charged with. The same thing, I kind of looked at it with all these gun laws. They're going to put all this ridiculousness out there in the hopes that these few stick. And a lot of this gun law is as bad as they are. We've still got all the other thing. The red flag law is horrendous. The amendments, the constitutional rights that it infringes upon, the voter ID thing, the illegal immigrants not being permitted to have a driver's license, even though that's not what we're calling it for whatever reason. That is what it is. And that's okay. So they passed all these other things, abortion, while we were distracted by the gun law issues. So a lot of damage has been done. It really has.
Yeah. Well, if I made a video earlier on And I said HB 961 is a distraction technique.
Mm-hmm.
They know it's never going to get through. They don't have the support. And they're hoping that we take that when that fails as a victory and just let everything else slide.
Right. That's implanted and designed to make us feel good about the fact that we won something. It's when they introduce something so ridiculous, they know it'll never get passed, but when they back off of it just a little bit, okay, we're not going to make you register your ARs. Okay, that's supposed to make us feel so good that we're okay with it. And that's all done by design, I feel like.
Oh, it definitely is, man. It definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
They do a lot of stuff like that. It's politics, right?
Right. It's the way they play the game.
Whether you're a politician or not, you're in politics, so you know how the game works. I do a lot of lobbying for gun rights organizations like GOA and stuff like that, so I know how politics works. But trying to convince other people out there, hey, that's not the bill you have to worry about. You have to worry about all these other ones because they're trying to distract you.
You do. While we're distracted with all this other noise, they're sliding these in underneath the radar, which are just as bad in my view, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's political theater.
That's a good way of putting it.
It is definitely political theater.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad. We need to get away from that. Washington said that your politicians should not be being a politician should not be a career.
Right. I agree with that. I'm all about term limits. Yeah. I even told the guy that I ran against for my seat now that sometimes, and I believe this, sometimes it's difficult to see the forest for the trees. Sometimes your nose is so close to the problems at hand that you're incapable of seeing a solution to the problem anymore. And I think that's where a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of ideas coming into a situation is always healthy for our government. When they can, when a new set of eyes and hands and ears on a situation can be put on something, and then something very obvious can come to the forefront that the people that have been there with their nose to the grindstone all those years weren't able to see. That's why I think it's healthy for our government to have that turnover so that you get a fresh perspective on things occasionally.
Yeah, if you ask Joe Biden what he's ever done, it's like, I've been a politician. I've been in Washington for
years. But now all of a sudden he's going to fix everything.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. What if I started as a mayor and I did this? It's like, okay, well, so you guys never really held a job. You don't know
right
what it's like, and somehow you both are very, very rich now.
And I hope to dispel at some point with my position here. I mean, politician doesn't have to be a dirty word. It's not a 4-letter word. It doesn't have to mean that you're a liar. It doesn't have to mean that you're sneaky or deceitful. I'm a regular old Joe that happens to be a politician. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be a dirty word. It doesn't mean that I'm not here working for the people. Trying to do the best I can to support the greatest good for the greatest number of them that I can.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, man.
Right.
Politician isn't a dirty word. I think career politician is a dirty word.
Right. It is. I think too, when you spend that much time in something, it breeds. It really does set the stage for things going horribly awry. By having that turnover built in, I think as I mentioned earlier, it just keeps things honest and keeps things healthy.
Yeah. What do they say? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right. Very true.
That is
very true.
All right. Well, we've been talking for about an hour, and I a couple stories I need to file tonight before I go to bed.
Sure.
But I want to thank you for coming on, Chris. Tell everyone.
I thank you. Time has really flown. I was thinking to myself coming into this, what in the world are we going to talk about for an hour? But I tell you, once we start talking, Time really flies, and I've really enjoyed it. I thank you again for having me on. I hope that it's something your viewers have benefited from and can get something out of.
Yeah. Do you have anything to plug? You want to tell people how to find you?
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad to talk to anybody that wants to. You can find me on Facebook. You know, it's perfectly open. I have a Cornwell for Berlin Ivor is my official political page, or you can search Chris Cornwell. I'll be glad to friend you. You can follow me there. C Cornwell at southamptoncounty.org is a good email address if you'd like to reach out to me that way. Private message me. You can Facebook message me any way you want to. I'll be glad to talk to you about any of it. If I can help you or your jurisdiction or your county or your elected officials with their ordinance, I'll be glad to do so. Be glad to talk to you about any of it anytime.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Now,
good luck with all your work ahead of you this year.
Thank you so very much. We're very busy, but we're going to stay after it.
Yeah, Thanks. And try not to pull your hair out.
Right. Thanks so much. Now, you take care.
All right. You do the same.
All right. Bye now.
All right, that is it for tonight. Tomorrow night, I have Holly Sullivan of the Connecticut Citizens Defense League on. Should be pretty interesting. We're going to find out what's going on out in Connecticut, and then we will have a great show, I guess. Next week, we have AK Mario. Talk about AK stuff and everything going on in Arizona. All right, my name is John, and I want to thank you for watching, and we are out.